Hello everyone, welcome to IE 151 module on database management. We will use Microsoft Access for this module. You can have the software as part of standard Microsoft 365 package. Um, Before we jump into Microsoft Access, let's get familiar with some basic terminologies used in database management. All right, so the formal definition of database is it's a collection of structured data. Now, what is structured data? The data that are pre-arranged or organized into a predefined way. Um, what do we mean by that is we usually look for a tabular format. The data is arranged in rows and columns or likewise. Another thing we look for is we don't want to mix up different data types. Um, if a variable has only numbers, we want to keep that as only numbers. If some variable has only text values, we want to have only text values corresponding to that. In contrast, if you think about unstructured data, they are not organized in these ways. For example, if I'm talking, right, someone is giving a speech, they're talking long sentences, and in their whatever they're saying, they have numbers, they're using dates, they're using text without any categorization. All right. Those sort of data we will say unstructured data. Now let's look into this example down here on top of the screen. Um, so the first box shows an example of an unstructured data, which reads out, I saw 3 cars driving southbound on I-10. The first car was a Toyota driving at approximately 50 miles per hour. The second car was an Oldsmobile driving 10 miles per hour slower than the first car. The third car, however, is 20 miles per hour faster than the second car, and it was a Volkswagen. Now I can represent this same information on the in a tabular form on the right side, and as you can see, this is very easy to get access to any given data. For example, if I ask you what is the speed of the second car, you have to scan through this whole paragraph to see where second car is, and then sort of calculate based on the reference values given here what is the speed of the second car. Because even though these are all text, in the description there was no standard style was followed. So the speed for the second and third car was not even given directly, they are given as a reference values. Now, when you look into structured data, if I ask you what is the speed of the second car, you can right away tell me, okay, this is 40 mph, right? Um, this also looks way more organized than this one. We are using a common um, style for representing the data. We have categorized the data types. For example, if you go into the car column, you see um, in this column we have only numbers. If you go into the make column, we have only short text. If you go to the speed column, we have only numbers. If you go in the direction column, we have sort of a mix-up of number and text, which essentially was converted into short text. So all of them were stored as short text. Let me talk about access a little bit here. So when we deal with access, we no longer call columns or rows in a table. We say fields and records. So the columns of a table are called fields in Access, and the rows of the table is called records. For example, if you come down here, um, for the make field, we have three records. First record is Toyota, second record is Oldsmobile, and the third record is Volkswagen. Likewise. So the takeaway from this slide is that the definition of database is collection of structured data. Structured data are organized in table-like format, um, where the columns are called fields and rows are called records. In one field, we have only one particular type of data. For example, if we have number, all the records in a field will be numbers. If a field is defined as text type, in that field, we will have only text data, right? All right, so now let's move on. Now, when we talk about Microsoft Access, we deal with four different types of objects. The first one is form, then comes tables, query, and reports. We use forms to add new information to the table or edit some existing information or even just to inspect. So this is a tool to enter or edit our data. All right. Now, tables are the place where your data is stored. Now you entered some forms, they go to some table. Um, we can have multiple table in one database, like maybe tens or even hundreds of tables. Um, we could have hundreds and thousands of fields in each of those tables, and we can have thousands of records for each field. All right. Now, if we go to query, what is query? Queries are used to extract some part of the information in the tables and present them in one single table. What that means is we probably want two um, fields from first table, one field from the second table, and three fields from the third table out of hundreds of fields in each of those tables. So the query will create a subset of all those information and present that as table. Now, the difference of query and other table is that query does not store any data. This gives you a window to look down to your data and see only what you want to see. Now, not only that, you can select which fields from which table you want to see, you can also filter out records given some condition. For example, the former slide, we saw a data table, and if we want to see only records that has speed of more than 40 miles per hour. So you can create those logical structures in the query to filter out unnecessary information. You can manually select which fields or records you want as well. Now again, the query presents the information in a table-like format, or actually in tables, although that does not store the data. Now, if you want to make a visual presentation, let's say you are printing out those data and you want to make them look better than a query, you want to make something more than just a table. Um, for the sake of presentation or even for ease of analysis, um, if you want to format, customize those sort of information, we can use reports to do that. So just going over all of these again, forms lets you add new information or edit the existing information which are stored in one or multiple tables. In each table we have um, many fields and records. Out of that, if I want to see only a particular um, items from these tables, the query creates that option for us. And if we want to make a better visualization, reports gives us that option. All right. let's move on. Microsoft Access implements the concept of something called relational database. Um, now, this is this is an easy concept to understand, but probably difficult to implement. However, it is already implemented in Access, so we don't have to worry about the difficult part. Now, what is relational database? We say a database can have multiple tables. Um, if those tables are linked somehow with one another, we call that a relational database. If all the tables in a database are independent, they don't have any links between them, we call them non-relational database. Um, to demonstrate an example, we are talking about a database on this slide which has three tables: customer information, order information, and product information. All right, now each of these tables has multiple fields. For example, order information has order ID, date, customer ID, product ID fields. Similarly, customer information and product information table has some fields. Now, how the link works between tables is that in order information table, we have a field customer ID, and in the customer information table, we have a field with the same name. This is important to note that the data types stored in those two fields in two different tables must be same. We can see there is a shared field between order information and product information as well. Now, if those links are established as relations, we have our relational database. Now, what does that imply? Think about it. If I have an order ID from, let's say, an invoice, I don't have any information about the customer of that invoice or order on this table. However, I know the customer ID with respect to that order ID. Now I can, if I create a query, the query takes that order ID, finds the associated customer ID, traces back the relation, goes to customer information table, and finds any information that I need that is associated with that customer ID. For example, if I have an order X and I have customer ID A, and it goes back and finds out that customer ID in customer information table and finds the first name and last name for me. Same way, if I have an order ID and if I know the product ID of that associated with that order ID, I can trace back, or the query can trace back for me, um, the product group, model, and color of that product ID from the product information table. Now, the important or implication of this is that I'm not creating a fourth table that has information combining these three tables, maybe taking two fields from here, three fields from here, two fields from here, and saving that as a separate table. No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to create a query given I defined these relationships. And from the query, I can say, okay, I have order number 5, and give me the customer's first name, last name, and the product details um, corresponding to that order number. Now the query can extract this selective information for me. What we are saving by doing that, we are not creating another table and saving some memory, right? And also we are avoiding creating redundant data while we are copying, pasting this information into a spreadsheet or a table. We don't need to do that, right? there are more advantages of this, but just to keep it short, we can have advantages like that because of implementing relational database. Now let's say I created a query and I can create a report to show me the information like this. You remember the query would show me the data as a table. Although it will not store it, but it will just show me those particular or selected fields and records based on the criteria I set, but still it's going to present that as a table. Now, in the report, I can customize that view to look like something similar to this. Let's say I want to know what are the orders placed by different customers. I want to group them by each customer, which would essentially look like this. So um, in the query, I have from the order information table, I have order numbers, right? Order IDs. So what the query does is it looks out for that order ID in the order information table and finds the customer ID and goes back to customer information and pulls out the first name and last name for me. What is the first name and last name of the customer associated with order ID 6? Sam Trevor. Okay. And what was the product information for that? Now it goes back to the same order ID, traces back the product ID, goes down to product information table, finds out products ID, and for that same record, it finds out the product group and model and shows it here. Now we don't have to do anything manually here. Once we set up the relation and we define the query, it can generate this information for us. And once we set up a report layout, the data is generated fully automatically. All right. We'll certainly do some examples to demonstrate these functionalities. Um, but this was just a heads up before we jump into Access. So see you in a bit while you start using Access.